For 12 long, relentless years, the roar of an 18-wheeler engine has been the only soundtrack to my life. I've hauled everything from the first brick of a skyscraper to sensitive, life-saving pharmaceuticals, turning my trailer into my metal shell, my solitary refuge, and my main home, where I sleep on the road, dine alone at desolate stops, and my window serves as a television, showing the incessant landscape of Mexico. I have traced the country's arteries with a surgeon's precision, knowing every killer curve, every stretch where the fog settles like a ghost, and every point of no return on the route spanning from the scorched dunes of Sonora to the green abysses of Chiapas. And I prided myself on being immune to truckers' legends and tales, as my only creed was punctuality and safety, an experience that had vaccinated me against fear, having seen everything from robberies and brutal accidents to the darkest face of loneliness. However, all that psychological armor completely crumbled, leaving no trace on a night that I swore was like any other, in the glacial cold of the Durango Highway, where the event I witnessed that dawn not only made me question my sanity, but redefined what it means to be on the road, and even more terrifying, what it means to be trapped on it. It was a night in February, sharp and dark like broken glass, and I was on the winding descent of the Durango Highway, a stretch famous for its endless ravines, with my load of construction materials, a routine delivery to Mazatlan, the kind of work that demands every fiber of your attention. It was close to 11:30, and the mountain's silence was so dense it could almost be cut with a knife, when my high beam caught a figure on the roadside, a man waving his arms with a desperation that seemed to transcend mere panic, wrapped in an overcoat too light for the Siberian cold of the Sierra. My instinct screamed, "Don't stop," recalling all the stories of ambushes, but the pure terror in his posture forced me to slam the air brake. He told me a vague story of a broken-down car and an urgent need to get to the next town, and I allowed him to get in, with the cold night air rushing in with him. But once inside, the silent terror began. We had barely resumed the drive when he said, "I see you're carrying something heavy. You need to be in Mazatlan before dawn, right?" And cold sweat ran down my back because I had not told him my destination, forcing me to question him with my eyes, but he responded by talking about the road, about a pothole coming up on the next curve, the correct way to take the slope without straining the transmission, details that only an experienced trucker would know. Then his voice became more intimate, revealing facts about my personal life, my trailer, my family, that made me tremble. It wasn't just guesswork, it was precise knowledge, an unnerving certainty that made me doubt if my passenger was human, making the cabin feel suffocating, even though the temperature had dropped. Upon reaching a particularly desolate stretch, where the road was a narrow thread flanked by an abyss, the man turned to me, and the pale dashboard light illuminated his eyes, showing a sorrow deeper than any ocean. And he whispered, "We're almost at my stop," his voice breaking in a way that seemed to come from the depths of the earth. I am not going to a town," he confessed, his breath condensing in the cold air of the cab. "I died here, at this precise spot, 3 years ago. My name was Pedro." My blood ran cold. He told me my truck's engine, my faithful companion, had failed on the night of his accident, just as mine was doing at that moment. A subtle yet undeniable tremor I felt in the steering wheel. He pointed to the right, into the total darkness, where nothing was visible but the edge of the mountain, saying, "My trailer plunged down that ravine, filled with exactly the same cargo, construction materials for Mazatlan." And he recounted his torment, the eternal cycle he was trapped in, the need to complete his last delivery, the burden of guilt, and the despair that no one knew his soul remained attached to that stretch, repeating the night of the accident, and seeking someone to give him a ride so he could tell someone that he had not abandoned his duty. "I just need someone to know," he said, and the air around him felt incredibly heavy, as if the pressure of time and suffering were compressed into the small space of the cab. We reached the first flickering streetlights of the nearest town, and the moment I stopped the trailer, before I can even turn off the engine, the passenger door opened and shut in an instant. The man was gone. No thank you, no goodbye, just a movement so fast he seemed to have disintegrated. I immediately turned around, my heart pounding at an alarming rate, to find the passenger seat completely empty, clean, without any mud marks, dust, or hair, yet a smell that could not be denied lingered in the dense air of the cab. A strong, pungent scent of damp earth, cold mud and decay, the stench of a place where sunlight never reaches. I sat there paralyzed by fear until the dawn began to tint the sky. And the next morning, with the sun on the windshield and logic slowly returning, I forced myself to search online, typing the exact words Pedro had given me. Durango Highway Trucker Accident, Mazatlan Materials, 3 years. And my phone screen yielded the headline that sealed my terror. An archival news story of a fatal accident detailing the vehicle, the destination, the cargo, and the exact date he had mentioned. I scrolled down and found the image. A grainy, old photograph of a middle-aged man with that same sorrowful gaze and scruffy beard. The photograph of Pedro, the man who had been sitting next to me all night. Since then, my route is different. The asphalt is no longer a simple road. It is the place where duties never end, and where the souls of the most committed truckers continue to travel the same stretch, night after night, seeking a witness so that their oath may be fulfilled in the eternity of the highway.
My father, a grizzled veteran of the long haul, possessed a deep well of highway wisdom. But one phrase always resonated with an unsettling gravity. On the road, you are never truly alone. A maxim I had taken lightly, interpreting it as a comforting nod to the camaraderie of the trucking community, a shared awareness across the CB radio waves. Yet I now understand that his words were a stark, chilling warning about the things that travel the darkness alongside us. A truth I came to fully comprehend after an encounter last October while I was hauling heavy agricultural machinery through the heart of Guanajuato, a routine job that required navigating the state's isolated serpentine highways, where the only company is the moon and the endless scrubland. The incident began on a particularly lonely stretch, the kind where cell service dies and the world shrinks to the beam of your headlights, when the quiet of the night was suddenly broken by a desperate, crackling voice over the CB radio. A fellow trucker pleading for assistance, claiming he had run completely out of fuel and was stranded, vulnerable, and alone in the darkness, his tone laced with genuine panic and exhaustion. I am usually one to keep moving, having learned the harsh lesson that lonely road stops often lead to trouble, scams, or worse. But something in that man's voice, a certain tremor of genuine helplessness that cut through the static, pierced my hardened caution and convinced me to break my own cardinal rule, swinging my massive rig around and backtracking to the reported location, determined to offer whatever assistance I could, be it fuel or just a call for a tow. I soon spotted his rig, an older model trailer parked awkwardly half on the shoulder, and I pulled up behind him, flooding the scene with my powerful floodlights, noting immediately that his turn signals were flashing, a sign of mechanical distress, a detail that oddly seemed to solidify his genuine need for help. And as I approached, an older man emerged from the shadows next to the trailer, his face etched with worry and relief, who immediately explained his predicament and urgently asked to use my satellite phone to call his company's emergency dispatch, as his own battery was dead and the location was a dead zone for conventional signals. I readily handed over my phone, watching as he walked a few paces away to escape the noise of my idling engine, speaking in low, hurried tones into the device. before returning it with a quick mumbled, "Thank you, they're sending help," and a strange, fixed look that settled uncomfortably upon me. The moment I took my phone back, I decided to verify his call out of habit, scrolling through the recent activity log, only to discover a chilling absence. There was no record of any recent outgoing calls, a complete and total blank slate, as if the man had merely pretended to dial and speak into the device while holding the receiver to his ear. A profound sense of dread, cold and immediate, washed over me, and I quickly looked up to confront him. But when my gaze returned to the older man, I noticed with mounting horror the second and most terrifying contradiction. The turn signals on his parked trailer were completely off, dead and dark, though I could have sworn, with the certainty of a professional observer, that they had been visibly flashing when I first arrived, bathing the rear of his rig in a sickly orange pulse just moments before. The combination of the non-existent call record and the phantom lights was an electric shock to my system, screaming that this was no ordinary trucker in distress, but something far more sinister. Without a word, I scrambled back into my cab, slammed the door shut, threw the transmission into gear, and accelerated away from the scene with a desperate surge of speed, my tires spitting gravel as I fled the motionless figure watching me in the rearview mirror. Just as I hit the next rise, clearing the range of his visual presence, his voice, devoid of the earlier distress, and now carrying a flat, unnervingly calm malevolence, crackled through my CB radio's speaker. "You shouldn't have stopped. Now I have seen you, and I know who you are." The radio then went instantly silent, leaving me alone with the icy terror of his final knowing words. I drove for another hour in a sweat-soaked panic before reaching a well-lit gas station that served as a major truck stop, needing coffee, light, and desperately needing to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. I recounted the strange encounter to the night attendant, a man who listened with a stoic, weary resignation, and who then confirmed my fears, telling me with disturbing nonchalance that several local truckers had reported similar experiences with false distress calls and vanishing lights on those very same highways. And he proceeded to tell me the legend of a local driver who, 5 years ago, had stopped to help a phantom trucker near the same spot, and ever since that night, he claims that something is constantly chasing him, and he repeatedly sees the chilling apparition of a phantom trailer in his mirrors, an empty shell of a rig stalking his every nocturnal move. The attendant's words didn't offer comfort, but confirmation, replacing my isolated terror with the awful knowledge that I had joined a very specific, very cursed club. Weeks later, the prophecy began to materialize. I was driving late one night on a lonely stretch of highway near Zacatecas, the landscape sparse and the darkness absolute, when a trailer suddenly appeared in my rear-view mirror, seemingly out of nowhere, an unnaturally close, silent shadow of chrome and steel that began to follow me with unnerving precision. For a heart-pounding 40 kilometers, 25 miles, the phantom rig maintained exactly the same distance and speed as I did, mirroring every lane change, every brake light flicker, a terrifying, silent escort that defied all logic and professional driving standards. I mashed the accelerator. I slowed down sharply. I tried every trick to lose or expose it, but it remained glued to my rear bumper, an unshakable sentinel. The terrifying vigil only ended when I finally reached a major junction, bathed in the harsh, comforting glare of streetlights and commercial signs. As the highway became illuminated and crowded with the signs of civilization, I glanced back one final time, and the silent, malevolent trailer was simply gone without a trace, vanished into the light and the noise, leaving only the echo of my racing heartbeat and the chilling void where it had been. Since that night, that spectral, phantom trailer regularly appears in my mirrors whenever I drive late at night through deserted areas, a silent, grim reminder of the price of breaking the road's isolation rule. And I no longer stop to help anyone on lonely highways, understanding with terrifying clarity what my father was truly trying to warn me about. There are things that travel with us in the darkness. They are not always ghosts, but sometimes they are something much worse. Entities drawn by the vulnerability of the lone traveler. And once you interact with them, once you break the seal of your isolation and they know who you are, they never completely let you go.
I first started working as a trucker when I was 25 years old, a green recruit, in the vast, unforgiving world of logistics. Having been offered the opportunity to learn the trade in my uncle's small transportation company, a humble but honest operation that became my unexpected entryway into a life I hadn't planned. Although I initially struggled with the solitude and the immense responsibility, I quickly came to enjoy the unique, boundless freedom of the road, the feeling of being a solitary commander of a massive machine, the endless horizon, a silent witness to my journeys. Yet I never could have imagined that one specific, ordinary November night, a night meant for hauling heavy cargo, I would pick up a passenger who would not only know the surface details of my life, but would penetrate the deepest, most intimate aspects of my history. Secrets so closely guarded that not even my own brothers were privy to them. I was transporting a heavy shipment of industrial machinery from Aguascalientes toward Zacatecas, a familiar route that offered no hint of the supernatural turn my night was about to take, when I noticed a woman, approximately 50 years old, standing motionless beneath a concrete pedestrian bridge, the fluorescent lights casting an eerie, pale glow on her figure. Despite my deeply ingrained trucker caution against random pickups, something about her stationary, dignified presence compelled me to pull over and offer her a ride. An impulse I couldn't rationally explain, but one that I obeyed without hesitation. She accepted with a quiet nod, and we set off. But barely 5 minutes into the journey, the conversation took a terrifying, unnatural turn when she began to reveal impossible details about my life, speaking not in questions, but in flat, unnerving statements of fact. She knew that I had been driving for 12 years since I was 25. She knew that my uncle had taught me the trade, and most horrifyingly, she recalled the specific, paralyzing terror of my second week on the job when I crashed a truck. A costly, deeply embarrassing accident that my uncle had quietly covered up and forgiven. A professional secret I had never breathed to a living soul, not even my closest family, but one she articulated with the casual ease of recounting yesterday's weather. Completely terrified, the blood draining from my face as I gripped the steering wheel, I demanded to know who she was and how she possessed this classified knowledge, my voice raw with panic and adrenaline. But instead of answering directly, she pressed on, delving into even deeper and more painful things that pierced my emotional armor. She knew that I desperately missed my father, who had passed away 4 years ago. A sudden, brutal loss that occurred while I was far away on the road, leaving me unable to reach him in time to say a final goodbye, a guilt that I carried like a physical weight. She told me that I still carried his photograph in my wallet and that I looked at it often when the solitude of the long haul became too heavy. And she spoke with painful accuracy of my recent breakup with Claudia, revealing that I had ended the relationship not because I didn't love her, but out of a paralyzing fear of commitment and failure, convinced that my life on the road made a lasting partnership impossible, a truth I had hidden even from myself. Finally, as the silence in the cab became unbearable, the woman identified herself, explaining that she was a messenger, an intermediary who appears only when someone is desperately struggling and needs to hear something profoundly important to break free from a painful past. She then delivered the reason for her presence, She transmitted my father's message, speaking of his enduring pride in the man I had become, assuring me that I must not blame myself for the circumstances of his death or for not being physically present, a guilt that had silently haunted me for years. She instructed me that I shouldn't be afraid of the solitude, but rather should open myself to the future, delivering a final, strangely specific prophecy that next month, at a small, unassuming diner near Salamanca, I would meet a woman with an unfolded map on the table, and that she would be the right one to share my life with, the partner who could understand and share the complexities of a trucker's life. The revelation hung in the air, a mixture of the spectral and the mundane, until we finally reached the outskirts of Zacatecas, where she asked to be let out. She thanked me with a gentle smile and stepped onto the pavement, walking just a few meters before doing the impossible. She literally disappeared between one step and another, vanishing into thin air as if she had been erased by the night, leaving no trace behind except the profound, undeniable shift in my emotional landscape. I drove away reeling, the experience feeling like a vivid, emotional dream, yet the clarity of her impossible knowledge anchored the encounter in reality. Exactly 1 month later, driven by a desperate need to test the final piece of the prophecy, I found myself sitting in a diner near Salamanca, and there, just as Elena, the name that had quietly settled in my mind for the messenger, had predicted, was that woman sitting at a booth with an unfolded map spread across the table, lost in navigational contemplation. I approached her, the memory of the ghostly messenger lending me a courage I never knew I possessed, and thus began a conversation that blossomed into the most meaningful relationship of my life, a bond that 2 years later has provided me with the companionship, grounding, and happiness I never thought possible, finally breaking the cycle of self-imposed loneliness. I often drive past that pedestrian bridge, and though I never see the messenger, I look out at the spot and silently offer my profound gratitude to that mysterious traveler for helping me let go of the paralyzing fear and guilt of the past and finally opening my heart and my life to the future.